Marvel tier list time. As you can see, I have all 23 at the time of recording this Marvel movies to be tiered into six different categories. S obviously being the best, A being the second best, B being C being D being oh, and F being oh god no, make it stop. As a general warning, I'm not the biggest Marvel movie fan in the world. I'm a fan of the comics, and I'm also a fan of pretentious cinema. So when I say a Marvel movie is S tier, I'm not saying it's a 10 out of 10 film, I'm saying relative to the other Marvel movies, it is S tier. Also, there are no TV shows here, because I haven't seen any of them. Whoops. Let's go. First up is Guardians of the Galaxy. I think this movie is actually pretty good. It is funny, it is one of the best scripts. The villain kind of sucks, but that's a general motif throughout the films. I think Chris Pratt is an endearing lead, obviously actual Chris Prattness withstanding in terms of how cool he is. I think that the rest of the ensemble is entertaining. I think Drax and Rocket are two of the funniest characters. I think Groot is maybe so ever overrated, but you know, it's still funny, and when he, you know, dies, it's like really sad. Guardians of the Galaxy is a solid A tier movie. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, I think is still a good movie, all things considered. I think the villain is stronger. Ego's by far a better villain than what's-his-face Ronan the Accuser. I think that what they do with Yondu is really good in this film. I think that the performances are still pretty good. I think Mantis is there. Overall, I like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I would maybe put it in B tier, because while I think it's good, I think it very much, in a way that the first movie doesn't, when there's a joke in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 that doesn't land, it stretches that joke out. The Taserface doesn't land, for me at least, and then they keep stretching that out, and so we have far too much time of people laughing at Taserface, and I'm not laughing at Taserface, and so for that reason I think the movie slightly suffers. I really like Ant-Man. Like, straight up, I think Ant-Man is possibly the most endearing Marvel movie. I think it is. In some ways, it feels the most small scale, which I think really works for the character. Small. Comedy. I think Paul Rudd does a really good job playing the character. I think the rest of the cast is pretty great. I think the villain is Ant-Man, but evil. The villain's probably the worst part about it. No, the villain is definitely the worst part about it. I think it has I think it has arguably the most fun with its concept out of every single Marvel movie. And I think stuff like the big Thomas the Tank Engine train is pretty iconic. And so for that reason, Ant-Man can go in A tier. That might be a hot take. I'm not entirely sure what the public reception of Ant-Man is, but for me, it's up there. Ant-Man and the Wasp, on the other hand, might not be as up there. This movie did not need to exist. It is there to set up Endgame, and it is blatantly, that's the only thing it is. You can watch the post-credit scene and basically get the most out of this movie. The villain is obviously, I think, better than Ant-Man's villain, but not by a whole lot. Everything about it just feels like Ant-Man -1. I think the Wasp is a good inclusion. I think there's enough about this movie that I like, and I would watch it again because it's a pretty entertaining flick. But this movie just did not need to exist. It is a C tier movie. Age of Ultron. Talk about wasted potential. Like, you bring in Ultron, you slap in the trailers Pinocchio songs of Ultron, and you make this guy so creepy, just straight up. Like, he feels like a horror villain, and then you just waste him, and he's just a robot army. And oh, this movie, it's a mess. They spend a lot. I mean, I don't think the time they spent in Hawkeye's farm is bad. I actually quite like it. And I like a lot of the conflicts. But this movie, blatantly, out of probably all the rest of the Marvel movies, feels like a movie made to set up other movies. And because of that, D tier. I don't like what this movie represents in terms of the fact it's basically just like a 2.5 hour long advert. But yeah, this movie, no. Infinity War, on the other hand, is good. Infinity War does the impossible and gives everyone screen time, which is more than I expected it to do. I don't think the arcs are even. I think it's very inconsistent. I think the Captain America stuff on Earth really, really falters. But I think Thanos is a really engaging part of it. I think he is arguably one of the best characters in the whole MCU. And I think because of the fact the film revolves around him so much, I think it really, really works. B tier. Black Panther is fine. It is passable. I don't get the hype for this one. I don't know how to word my feelings about Black Panther in a way that sounds logical. I think the "what are those" joke it's really bad. And I think the writing generally suffers. I think Killmonger is a really good villain. I think Michael B. Jordan pulls him off really, really well. But the rest of it, I don't know. I just don't feel it. I'd say Black Panther's a C-tier film. Civil War. Civil War it's fine. I haven't really spared a thought for it in the last, 4 years, which I guess kind of shows how good it is. I think the fight scene in the airport, the fight scene between all of them, the actual Civil War, it's good. I think it's the best part of the movie. But I don't think it's anything incredible. I think the introduction of Spider-Man is handled well. I think the performances are generally good. I think the final bit is good. I do remember coming out of Civil War disappointed that they didn't kill off someone, just anyone. And I still stand by that. I think Civil War was the perfect opportunity to introduce stakes instead of doing it so late on in the phase with Infinity War. I think Civil War is fine. I'd say C tier probably. So First Avenger is a hard film for me to talk about, as I saw it so long ago. And I don't really remember much about it, aside from the fact it is, for me, at least to me, I think it was a bit of a bog standard war film. It doesn't do anything particularly unique, and I don't find Captain America that charismatic, or I don't find Captain America that interesting. This, for me, is a D tier film. It is, I think, very, very forgettable. I don't remember a whole lot about it. It doesn't work for me. This is not my kind of film. Winter Soldier, on the other hand, kicks a lot of ass. The action in that film is really, really good. I think the whole Winter Soldier plot is a fantastic one. I think the film does it well. I think that Captain America is a bit more interesting in it. There's a lot of personal conflict throughout, which I find interesting. I think Black Widow is there, and and she does well. I think Falcon is good in the film. I like this film. I think the big twist involving S.H.I.E.L.D. is really good. I think this is where I think Winter Soldier is a good film. I like Winter Soldier. It's a B tier for me. Doctor Strange is definitely the kind of movie where they're showing off the visual effects and not really being subtle about the fact that's really all they're doing. The villain is incredibly poor. I don't even remember his name. This might be the only film where I don't remember the villain's name. And that includes freaking Thor: The Dark World, which we'll get to. But this film, I think the rest of the cast is good. I think Benedict Cumberbatch does a good job. The guy who plays Baron Mordo, I think, does a good job. Tilda Swinton does a good job. Overall, I think it's a fine film. I would watch it again, but I don't think it's anything special. I don't dislike it, though. The visual effects are also spectacular. I feel that needs to be said. Iron Man 1. I rewatched this recently. It feels so fresh still. The improvisational dialogue really, really works in this film. Robert Downey Jr. is fantastic. I've never been a fan of the fact that people say that Robert Downey Jr. deserved an Oscar for his role as Iron Man, especially in Endgame and whatnot. I don't think he comes anywhere near deserving of an Oscar, but I think his performance in this film is pretty stellar. Jeff Bridges makes for a fine villain, and I think that's the film's biggest drawback. He just doesn't stand out particularly enough. But aside from that, I think it really, really, really works. I really, really like this film. I would put this as an S tier, if I'm being honest. I think the action's good. I think the whole bit to do with how he becomes Iron Man's really interesting. It's really funny as well. I like this film a lot. Iron Man 2 is the worst film in the MCU. Weirdly enough, going from my personal favourite so far to my personal least favourite so far. Iron Man 2 is Whiplash as a villain, which I think says enough about it. It is... I'm going to be honest, I saw this one maybe once on a holiday, years ago. Like back when it, in like, maybe when it, in like 2012 maybe. And this film did not do anything for me. I remember a racing car scene, I remember Whiplash, I remember Justin Hammer. Then, oh boy, does that say a lot about this film. I know that I remember the most disappointing aspect of this film is that you have Whiplash with his fancy whips, and you end up with a battle of him in an Iron Man suit. Why? Why take away his, like, most unique quality and put this film's villain in an Iron Man suit when that's literally what you did in the first film? This film irritates me. This might be the most hot take of the video, but I really, really like Iron Man 3. I think that it is probably the best drama of the whole MCU. I think that the PTSD thing is handled really well. I think that the Mandarin twist is good. I think it's a good subversion of expectations and playing on the trope of a villain who is maybe ever so slightly a bit outdated. Obviously, I know the Mandarin is coming back in Shang-Chi, which I'm interested to see how they do that. But I think that the worst part of Iron Man 3, weirdly enough, I think I've said this about almost every single film so far, but the worst part of Iron Man 3 is the villain. I don't remember his name, I don't remember the real villain, but I think the rest of the film holds up to where that's the only thing that's keeping it from being an S tier film for me, is just the villain. Spider-Man Homecoming is really fun. Tom Holland's interpretation of Spider-Man is fun. I know people have issue with the whole MCU angle of the fact that, oh no, he's being taught by Iron Man, he's Iron Man 2. And while I agree, I'm not the biggest fan of that in concept, I think it works here, is the fact this is a new Spider-Man finding his footing. I would say I really like this film. I think Vulture is one of the best villains in the MCU. He is both the perfect twist villain, and the twist to do with him is really, really well pulled off. And bro, that car scene, like the car scene where he's in the car, oh, that scene is so good. Incredible Hulk gets too much flack, but it's still a D tier film. It has Ty Burrell in it, and so I can't make it F tier because it's Ty Burrell. But like, it is still not a particularly great film. Abomination is so just there as a villain. I think that guy who plays him, I don't remember his name, but his performance I think is pretty poor. I think all the performances in the film are pretty poor, and I think that's its biggest drawback. I do kind of like how it just jumps into things. I can appreciate that. I think the actual Hulk CGI is good, and I think the Hulk fights are good, but it's the Incredible Hulk. I think enough people have like talked smack about this one. The Avengers. Yeah, this film's very much here. This film is iconic in a lot of ways, and I think it deserves to be iconic. But it is a lot of setup too, not a whole lot of payoff in the end. I mean, of course, the best joke in the MCU is, of course, where Hulk punches Thor, because violence is obviously comedy. No, I actually really do like that joke. But I would say that this film is iconic. I think it's the top of B tier, if I'm being honest. This film is good. This film's really good. Thor: The Dark World sucks. It really, really, really sucks. This is Thor: The Dark World, isn't it? Yeah, it is. Okay. Thor: The Dark World really, really sucks. This film is long, this film is boring, this film is dull visually. They took Asgard and made it dull visually, which is impressive. The villain is possibly the most pathetic. The whole Jane Foster plot is there and doesn't really go anywhere, particularly. I think that it's Thor: The Dark World. Then Thor Ragnarok literally starts off trying to retcon everything about Thor: The Dark World. That's how bad this film is. The original Thor is a weird, weird film. It might be the most weird in the MCU so far, in the fact that it is full of Dutch tilts. I think that's the right word for it. With all the weird camera angles and all the slanted camera angles, which are just so random. And they kind of add to the sense of this surreal, otherworldly thing, and that's why I kind of like it. I kind of dig it. I think the comedy is very hit or miss. I think the characters are very hit or miss. but I also don't mind the switching from Asgard scenes to Earth scenes. I think Chris Hemsworth is a good Thor. I like his portrayal of Thor in this film. I know there's a whole, stoic, boring. I like funny Thor. But, bro, he's funny in this too. I think this is possibly the best Thor film, which says a lot about my feelings on Thor Ragnarok. This film is so try-hard. And I mean that not necessarily in a bad way, but also kind of in a bad way. This film is quite obvious. Taika Waititi is a really interesting filmmaker, and he's made some good films. What We Do in the Shadows is particularly great, but Thor Ragnarok, a lot of the jokes don't land for me. Obviously, that's a personal preference thing. I know this is, for instance, my mum's favourite film in the whole MCU, but for me, some of the jokes, a lot of the jokes don't really work. The scenes on Asgard in this film are appalling. All the Hela stuff. Hela is boring. I think everything to do with her does not work. Karl Urban's character does not work. The stuff on the Trash Planet is good, and it's by far the best part of the film. Easily. The production design is really good. And especially the Trash Planet looks really, really good. And the film has a really good sense of stakes. I think it is arguably the best in the whole MCU, aside from Endgame, in terms of stakes. That you never know what's going, well, it's very good at establishing stakes. And that, because obviously Asgard explodes at the end, essentially. And Thor loses an eye, which, to be fair, is more permanent stakes than most of these films. So for that case, it gets put in, high C tier. Also, some of these tiers are arranged, some of them aren't. If I was to arrange them, wait. Okay. The tiers are now arranged in an order that I'm vaguely comfortable with. Speaking of vaguely comfortable, that's not a transition at all, but Captain Marvel. This film feels like a Phase 1 film a la Captain America and the First Avenger, and is put in the end of Phase 3. Obviously, we know why it's there. It's there to establish Captain Marvel. Did it need to? Captain Marvel is an ex machina at the best of times. Deus ex machina, I think is the proper term, but this film is boring, this film is dull. I would have rather this film didn't exist and she came in just randomly in Endgame and we were like, oh, who's this? And then we'd learn. I would have rather that. Obviously this film is the first film to feature a woman as the protagonist, the first Marvel film to feature, it's not the first film ever to feature a woman as protagonist, but it's the first Marvel film to feature a woman as a protagonist, and for that reason, it's really good, that's really good. But I do still think the Black Widow should have came first. Obviously, I haven't seen Black Widow yet. Don't know if it's any good. But I still think the Black Widow should have got over the film first. This is, high D tier. Endgame is the best film in the MCU. It straight up is, in my opinion. I think the drama is really, really good. The sense of stakes is really good. The sense of progression in the 5 years later thing is great. The fight scene at the end is iconic. And Captain America with Mjolnir going, Avengers, assemble, is really cool, and I really like that. But I guess my flaws with Endgame is that the final bit looks visually dull, and the whole kind of film looks visually dull. The Hawkeye Black Widow stuff with the Soul Stone sometimes works for me. I've seen this film about 3-4 times. It sometimes works, it sometimes doesn't. The film is very long, and I think it deserves to be that long. And I think the time travel stuff is all really, really good. I think it's one of the best examples of time travel in a movie. I think Endgame works on a whole lot of levels. I also find the ending really good. I know there's a lot of hate of, Captain America went into time sex with Peggy Carter. And sure, that's not, maybe that's not in line with Captain America, but it makes for a satisfying ending in my opinion. So I really like it. Far From Home is Jake Gyllenhaal in it, so you already know it's A tier. But I prefer this film over the first Homecoming in a bunch of ways, mostly visually. The film is visually brilliant with all the Mysterio stuff. I think Mysterio is a really cool villain. I think that taking Spider-Man out of his original home is always fun. It breaks the, I guess, visual monotony of all the other MCU films, mostly taking place in the same city. I think that the problem with the film lies in the whole Iron Man-ization of Spider-Man still. It gets a bit much in this film. That being said, the post-credit scene kind of makes up for it. The post-credit scene in this film is really fun. Return of J. Jonah Jameson, I really like. But that is all of them. Let's not go all the way up there. This is all of them. This is my list. S tier, Avengers Endgame, Iron Man. A tier, Iron Man 3, Guardians of the Galaxy, Ant-Man, Spider-Man Far From Home. B tier, Avengers, Spider-Man Homecoming. Avengers Infinity War, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Captain America the Winter Soldier. C tier, Thor, Thor Ragnarok, Black Panther, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Civil War, Doctor Strange. D tier, Captain Marvel, Incredible Hulk, Age of Ultron, First Avenger. F, Thor the Dark World, Iron Man 2. I'm surprised by how little ended up in F, but I guess that goes to show my restraint.